You are listening to The Testimonial, a podcast of critical essays bearing witness to the forces that shape our world. We conduct historical autopsies, expose hidden systems, and decode the profound truths within culture, politics, and the seemingly whimsical. Each episode is a deep dive, a forensic investigation. This is the evidence. You are about to hear the testimony on the Blue Helmets, the unchecked terror of peacekeeping missions. Today, we're examining a profound betrayal that begins with a symbol recognized all around the world. But we're going to start with a voice that is rarely ever heard.
To really get to the bottom of this story, we have to start here. Not with a big statistic, but with a single voice. A mother from the Democratic Republic of Congo says, "The world sent its guardians, but they sent us predators in disguise." That one sentence, wow, it just captures this devastating betrayal that is really at the absolute heart of everything we're going to talk about.
So what you have is this massive gulf between the promise and the reality. On one side, you've got the ideal, right? Protection, hope, salvation. But on the other side, for way too many people, the reality on the ground has been predation, terror, and exploitation. It is a complete, total inversion of the mission.
And that brings us to our first section, a symbol of betrayal. You see, the core idea we're digging into here isn't just about a few bad apples. The argument from the source material is that we're talking about a rotten orchard. How does the world's most noble ideal become a shield for some of its absolute worst crimes? So let's break down how that could even be possible.
And this brings us to a thesis that is, well, it's incredibly challenging. The idea is that the systematic abuse by UN peacekeepers isn't a failure of the system. It's a feature. The argument is that this predation is actually enabled by a structure that's working exactly as it was designed to, protecting the institution, not the people it's supposed to serve.
So you have to ask, how does a situation like this even develop? Well, the sources point to what they call the perfect storm for exploitation. And what that suggests is that this abuse isn't random. No, it's a predictable outcome when you get this collision of absolute power and absolute vulnerability. And this storm really has three key parts that, when you put them all together, they effectively strip away a person's ability to give any kind of meaningful consent. First, you've got economic control, where life-saving aid becomes a weapon. Second, there's legal immunity, where the peacekeeper is basically untouchable, they're above the law. And third, you have psychological trust, where that initial savior narrative gets twisted into a tool for exploitation.
And look, this idea of weaponizing aid, it's not just a theory. There is a chillingly specific example from West Africa in what became known as the baby egg scandal. Here, peacekeepers were found to be trading essential food meant for starving children, for sex. It became so common that it actually got its own nickname. It is just hard to imagine a more profound violation of trust. So, if that power imbalance creates the opportunity for abuse, the next big question is, how do the perpetrators get away with it? This is what's been called the architecture of impunity. And that's not just a loophole, you guys. It's a fortress.
And this fortress, it's built on three massive pillars, all designed to make justice just disappear. First, jurisdictional immunity, which is basically a legal shield from local courts. Second, the home countries of these troops, they almost never prosecute them. And finally, the UN itself has been accused of actively obstructing justice to protect its own image.
I mean, this raises a pretty obvious question, right? A question that gets to the absolute heart of the problem. With all these layers of protection, with a system this robust, who actually ends up paying the price?
The answer is so shocking in its simplicity, and it speaks volumes about where the system's priorities really are. The number of peacekeepers successfully prosecuted by their own home countries for these crimes is near zero. A plane ticket home is far more likely than a prison sentence.
And if you want the perfect example of this self-protection, just look at how the UN treats whistleblowers. When a senior UN official named Anders Kompass exposed the systemic rape of children by peacekeepers, the UN didn't thank him, they suspended him for leaking the report. Just think about that for a second. They punished the person who revealed the crime, not the criminals themselves.
And here's what's so crucial to understand. This is not a new problem. The source materials argue that the UN has known about this pattern for decades and has consistently chosen to look the other way. This suggests that this rot is foundational, not just some recent development.
And when you actually look at the timeline of ignored red flags, a really clear pattern emerges. In Cambodia, back in the early 90s, the blueprint for this was basically set. Then in Mozambique, an internal UN memo about child abuse was actively suppressed. In Bosnia, in the 90s, you have reports of UN police being complicit in human trafficking. And this all led to the 2005 Zaid report, where the UN itself basically admitted its zero-tolerance policy was just an empty slogan.
So looking at this long history of failure, some sources propose a verdict that is much more radical and, frankly, much more disturbing. They call it the neo-colonial critique. And the idea is that maybe this isn't about broken peacekeeping at all. Maybe it's about a successful reenactment of a very old script, the script of colonial power.
And when you actually lay out the parallels, they are pretty stark. The civilizing mission of old, well, now it's called the responsibility to protect. Immunity from local law? Still there. Control of resources is now control of humanitarian aid. And what was once just called sexual domination is now often dismissed with the euphemism survival sex. The language has changed, but the power dynamics, they look eerily similar.
So, after all of this, what does that blue helmet symbol truly mean? What are we supposed to take away from this? We have to seriously reconsider its meaning when we look at all of this evidence.
A reflection on the perversion of the very concept of peace when it is enforced through violence and exploitation. The blue helmet was meant to be a shield for the powerless. Until the system is cleansed, it remains a license for the powerful. You've been listening to the testimonial on the blue helmets, the unchecked terror of peacekeeping missions. If you enjoyed this summary, for the full testimonial, please follow the link in the description or search for the testimonial on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on social media at The Testimonial for updates and to join the conversation. If you believe a topic deserves a testimonial, let us know.